The venomous words tore through me like shattered glass as my son's face twisted with rage. "You're half the man my father-in-law is," he yelled, his voice echoing through the room with such hatred that my chest tightened. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice crashing down on me, then calmly reached for my phone. What I did next didn't just leave him speechless, it exposed a web of lies that would destroy everything he thought he knew about his perfect life. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The smell of pot roast had been filling my small kitchen for the better part of 3 hours, the same recipe I'd perfected over 28 years of Sunday dinners. I'd learned to cook it perfectly, tender enough to cut with a fork, seasoned just the way Tyler liked it when he was growing up. Back then, he'd sit at this very table doing homework while I prepared dinner, occasionally looking up to ask me about fractions or geography or why the sky was blue. Those were simpler times when a home-cooked meal and a father's attention were enough to make him smile. Now, as I watched my 28-year-old son fidget in his $1,200 suit, I wondered when exactly everything had changed. Tyler sat stiffly across from me at the worn oak table I'd bought second-hand when he was 10, his designer watch catching the light from the overhead fixture I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Everything in this house told a story of making do, of stretching dollars, of choosing function over form. Everything except Tyler, who looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine advertisement for luxury watches. Emily perched beside him, and I had to admit she was a beautiful girl. Her blonde hair was pulled back in one of those effortless styles that probably took an hour to achieve, and her jewelry caught the light every time she moved. The pearl necklace alone probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. But there was something genuine about her, something that reminded me of Tyler's mother. She had kind eyes, even when she was nervous, and she was nervous now. "Mister? Franklin, this smells absolutely incredible," Emily said, her voice carrying that slight breathiness that came with trying too hard to be polite. "Tyler's told me so much about your Sunday dinners. He said they were legendary when he was growing up." I smiled at her, genuinely warmed by the compliment. "Well, I hope it lives up to the hype. Though I have to warn you, I'm not much of a fancy cook. Just good, honest food." Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the word honest, and I caught the look he exchanged with Emily. It was the kind of look that said, "Here we go again with Dad's humble routine." The kind of look that suggested my son was embarrassed by my authenticity, my refusal to pretend to be something I wasn't. I set the serving platter in the center of the table, the same blue and white ceramic dish I'd used for special occasions since Tyler was in elementary school. The pattern was faded now, and there was a small chip on one corner from when a 7-year-old Tyler had accidentally knocked it off the counter, but it still did its job. Like everything else in this house, it had character that came from years of faithful service. "So," I said, settling into my chair and reaching for the carving knife. "How are things at the firm, Tyler? Still working those crazy hours?" Tyler shifted in his seat, straightening his already perfect tie. "Actually, things have been really good. Really, really good. We just closed the Henderson merger, you know, the one I've been working on for 6 months. My bonus alone was more than—" He caught himself glancing at Emily, who touched his arm gently. "More than what?" I asked, though I suspected I knew where this was going. "More than you make in a year, Dad." The words came out flat, matter of fact, like he was reading stock prices from the financial pages. $68,000 for 6 months of work. I continued carving the roast, my hands steady despite the sting of his words. "That's wonderful, son. You've worked hard for your success." "Have I, though?" Tyler leaned back in his chair, and I could see him building up to something. There was an energy about him, a restlessness that had been growing over the past year. I mean, let's be honest here, Dad. Success isn't just about working hard, it's about working smart. It's about positioning yourself with the right people, making the right connections, and understanding how the world really works. Emily's hand found Tyler's arm again, a gentle warning that he either didn't notice or chose to ignore. Her eyes met mine across the table, and I saw apology there, mixed with something that might have been fear. "And how does the world really work, Tyler?" I asked, placing a generous slice of roast on his plate. "Look around you, Dad." Tyler gestured broadly at the kitchen, taking in the 20-year-old appliances, the linoleum floor with its worn spots near the sink, the mismatched chairs around the table. "You've been living in this same house for 30 years, driving the same truck for 15, working at the same garage for most of my life. Where has all that hard work gotten you?" I set down the carving knife and really looked at my son. When did his face become so sharp, so calculating? When has the softness of youth been replaced by this hard edge of judgment? It got you through college without student loans. It got you through law school. It got you into that firm where you're making $68,000 bonuses. No, Dad, that's not how it works. Tyler's voice was gaining momentum now, like a train building speed down a hill. What got me into that firm was meeting Emily. What got me that bonus was being married to the daughter of Marcus Williams. That's how the world actually works. It's about who you know, who you're connected to, what circles you move in. The name hung in the air between us like smoke. Marcus Williams, Tyler's father-in-law. The man I'd been hearing about for 3 years now, always in tones of reverence and awe. The successful businessman, the self-made millionaire, the man who had everything Tyler thought I lacked. "Marcus just bought Emily a new car," Tyler continued, his voice taking on that proud, bragging tone that made my stomach clench. "A Mercedes, brand new, top of the line, didn't even blink at the $80,000 price tag, just walked into the dealership and wrote a check. Cash. Can you imagine that, Dad? Having so much money that $80,000 is nothing?" Emily's face had gone pink with embarrassment. "Tyler, maybe we shouldn't—" "No, Em, it's fine. Dad needs to hear this." Tyler turned back to me, his eyes bright with something that looked dangerously close to contempt. "Marcus treats his family like royalty. He takes us on vacations to Europe, first-class flights, 5-star hotels, the works. He bought us the down payment for our house. 30% down on a $500,000 property, just because he wanted us to have the best. I thought about the down payment I'd scraped together for this house 29 years ago. $3,000, saved penny by penny over 2 years, mostly from working overtime at the garage. I thought about the pride I'd felt walking into that real estate office with a cashier's check, about the way Tyler's mother had cried happy tears when we got the keys. "And it's not just the money," Tyler pressed on, warming to his theme. "Marcus commands respect. When he walks into a room, people notice. They listen. They want to do business with him. He's built an empire from nothing, Dad. Nothing. And now he's worth millions." The silence stretched between us, filled only by the tick of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of the refrigerator. I could feel Emily's eyes on me, could sense her discomfort with the direction this conversation had taken. But Tyler was just getting started. "Do you know what it's like?" Tyler said, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow felt more cutting than shouting. "Trying to explain to my colleagues why my father still lives like this? Why does he still work with his hands like some kind of common laborer? Why does he drive a truck that's older than some of my co-workers?" Each word was precisely chosen, designed to cut deep. I thought about those hands he was so ashamed of, the ones that had changed his diapers and tied his shoes and helped him with homework and held him when he cried. The ones that had worked 16-hour days to pay for his education, that bore permanent stains from engine oil and bore scars from years of honest labor. "Tyler, please." Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus Williams is everything a man should aspire to be," Tyler continued, his voice gaining strength and venom. "He's successful, he's respected, he's powerful. He provides for his family not just adequately, but abundantly. He's somebody important in this world." Tyler stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor with a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. His face was flushed now, his carefully styled hair falling across his forehead as his composure finally cracked completely. "You want to know the truth, Dad? You want to know what I really think?" He was breathing hard now, his chest rising and falling like he'd been running. "You're half the man my father-in-law is." The words exploded in the small kitchen like a gunshot. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The wall clock seemed to tick louder, marking off seconds in a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. I felt the words hit me like physical blows, each syllable designed to wound. But underneath the immediate pain, underneath the shock of hearing such cruelty from my own son, something else was stirring. Something that had been building for months as I'd watched Tyler transform into someone I barely recognized. Something cold and patient and very, very determined. I reached for my phone with steady hands, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I'd hoped I'd never have to use. Tyler was still standing, chest heaving, waiting for me to crumble under the weight of his words. Emily was frozen in her chair, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Instead of breaking down, I pressed the call. "Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI Financial Crimes Division," came the crisp, professional voice on the other end. "Agent Martinez, this is Wesley Franklin. I think it's time we had that conversation." Tyler's face drained of all color in an instant. His mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. He looked like a man who'd just watched his entire understanding of reality crumble into dust. Emily's gasp caught in her throat, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. The silence that followed was so complete, so profound, that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. For a full 10 seconds, Tyler stood there speechless, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume, his arrogant confidence replaced by something that looked very much like terror. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Tyler's voice cracked like a teenager's, all his earlier bravado evaporating. He sank back into his chair as if his legs had given out, his expensive suit suddenly looking like costume jewelry on a child playing dress-up. I ended the call and set the phone down with deliberate precision. "It means, son, that you might want to reconsider your definition of what makes a man." Emily grabbed Tyler's arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler? What's going on? Why would your father be calling the FBI?" For the first time in months, I looked at my daughter-in-law, really looked at her. She was 26 years old, brilliant, beautiful, and completely unaware that her perfect world was built on quicksand. Her father had done such a masterful job of compartmentalizing his life that even his own daughter didn't know who he really was. "Emily, sweetheart," I said gently, "what exactly do you think your father does for a living?" She blinked, confusion clouding her features. He's in investment management. He has his own firm, Williams Capital Solutions." "And how long has he been running this firm?" "About 8 years. He started it right after." She trailed off, a frown creasing her forehead. "Right after we moved from Chicago. He said he wanted a fresh start." Tyler was watching our exchange like a spectator at a tennis match, his head swiveling back and forth. "Dad, what are you getting at? Stop playing games." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, retrieving a manila folder I'd kept hidden behind the coffee maker for the past 6 months. Inside were photocopies of documents that had taken me 2 years to gather, bank statements, property records, SEC filings, and photographs that told a story Tyler wasn't going to like. "Tyler, you asked me once why I never remarried after your mother died, why I never tried to better myself, as you put it." I spread the first document on the table, a bank statement showing multiple wire transfers in amounts that made Emily gasp. "It's because I was busy doing something more important." "I was protecting you." The numbers on the page were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing in and out of accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg, all linked to Williams Capital Solutions, all dated within the past 3 years. These are your father-in-law's financial records, Emily. At least the ones I could track down legally. I pulled out another document. This one shows the real estate purchases he's made in the past 5 years. 17 properties across 4 states, all paid for in cash, all purchased through shell companies. Tyler's hand shook as he reached for the papers, his lawyer's training automatically kicking in as he began to scan the documents. I could see him processing the information, see the exact moment when his professional knowledge intersected with his personal denial. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. This has to be fake, some kind of mistake. But his voice lacked conviction, and his eyes were already beginning to show the first cracks in his certainty. Marcus is successful, but at this level of money, where would it come from? Even the most successful investment advisors don't have this kind of liquid capital. For a moment, Tyler just sat there, staring at the evidence spread before him, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. No sound came out. He looked like a man whose entire world had just shifted on its axis, leaving him speechless and struggling to find his footing in a reality that no longer made sense. "That's exactly what I've been wondering for the past 2 years," I continued, watching Tyler's face carefully. "See, Tyler, when you started dating Emily, when you brought her around and started talking about her father's incredible success, something didn't add up. Investment advisors make good money, sure, but they don't go from having nothing to owning multiple properties worth millions of dollars in just a few years." Emily was staring at the documents like they might bite her. "My father, he said he'd been saving for years. He said he'd made some good investments before the firm took off." "Your father made investments, all right, just not the legal kind." I pulled out the final document, a photograph taken with a telephoto lens that showed Marcus Williams shaking hands with a man outside a warehouse in Detroit. "This is your father's meeting with Vincent Caruso 6 months ago. Caruso runs one of the largest money laundering operations in the Midwest." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler's breathing had become shallow and rapid. Emily looked like she might be sick. I felt no satisfaction in their shock, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. "Marcus Williams isn't a successful businessman, Emily. He's a criminal. And Tyler, the man you think I should aspire to be? He's been using you both as unwitting accomplices in his operation." Tyler's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You're lying." I reached for my phone again, this time pulling up a recording app. "Agent Martinez has been building a case against your father-in-law for 18 months. I've been helping her." I hit play, and Marcus Williams' voice filled the room, caught on a wire I'd worn to their last family gathering. "The beauty of having kids is they never ask questions about where the money comes from. They just enjoy spending it. Tyler and Emily are perfect, young, naive, and completely legitimate on paper. Every dollar I run through them looks as clean as snow." Emily's sob cut through the recording like a knife. Tyler's face had gone from pale to gray, his hands clenched into fists on the table. I stopped the recording and watched my son crumble before my eyes. Not physically, Tyler remained upright in his chair, but something fundamental inside him was collapsing. The scaffolding of his worldview, built on admiration for a man who had never deserved it, was falling piece by piece. "I need to tell you both a story," I said, my voice softer now, "about what really happened when Tyler was 7 years old." Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of mascara across her cheek. Tyler hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even blinked since the recording ended. He was staring at the table like he could bore a hole through it with his gaze. "Your mother didn't just die, Tyler. She was killed by a drunk driver on Highway 36, coming home from her second job at the diner. She was working 2 jobs because I wasn't making enough at the garage to cover your medical bills from when you had pneumonia that winter." The words came easier than I'd expected, even after all these years. After the funeral, I had a choice. I could take the insurance money, $75,000, and use it to start over somewhere else, maybe go back to school, get a degree, become the kind of man who wears suits and works in offices. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the small backyard where Tyler had learned to ride a bike, where I'd taught him to throw a baseball, where he'd sat with me on summer evenings while I grilled burgers on the second-hand barbecue I'd bought from a garage sale. Instead, I put every penny of that money into a college fund for you. I kept working at the garage, kept living in this house, kept driving that same truck you're so embarrassed by. When college came, you never had to take out loans. When you needed a car, I bought you one. When you wanted to go to law school, the money was there. I turned back to face them. Emily was crying silently now, understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. Tyler still looked like he'd been hit by a truck. For 21 years, Tyler, I worked 60-hour weeks. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch so you could have steak for dinner. I wore the same 3 shirts to work for 5 years so you could have new clothes for school. I never went on vacation. Never bought myself anything I didn't absolutely need. Never even went on a date because every spare moment and every spare dollar went to you. The kitchen clock ticked loud in the silence. Somewhere outside, a neighbor was mowing their lawn, the sound distant and normal in a world that no longer felt normal at all. And through all of it, I continued, I was proud of the man you were becoming, proud when you graduated summa cum laude, proud when you passed the bar exam, proud when you married Emily. I sat back down, meeting my son's eyes for the first time since I'd started talking. But somewhere along the way, you forgot where you came from. You forgot what real strength looks like. Tyler's voice was hoarse when he finally spoke. Dad, I didn't know. You didn't want to know. It was easier to believe that Marcus Williams represented success, that his way was the right way. It was easier to be ashamed of your old man and his calloused hands than to understand what those hands had built. Emily reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine. Mr. Franklin, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about any of this. About what you sacrificed, about what my father, about what he really is. You couldn't have known, sweetheart. Marcus is very good at what he does. He's spent years perfecting the image of a successful businessman, and he uses that image to manipulate people, including his own daughter. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and felt my stomach tighten. Agent Martinez. Teams are in position. Warrants are signed. We move in 30 minutes. But before I could respond to the text, something unexpected happened that would change everything. The front door of my house burst open with a crash that made all 3 of us jump. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, and suddenly Marcus Williams himself appeared in my kitchen doorway. He was still wearing his expensive suit, but it was disheveled now, his tie askew and his usually perfect hair messed from running. His face was flushed with anger and something that looked like desperation. In his hand, he held a cell phone, and his eyes were wild with the look of a cornered animal. "Well, well," Marcus said, his voice dripping with a mixture of charm and menace that I'd never heard before. "Wesley Franklin, the humble mechanic who thinks he's smarter than everyone else." Emily gasped and shrank back in her chair. Tyler stood up so fast he knocked over his water glass, sending liquid spilling across the table and onto my carefully arranged documents. "Marcus," Tyler stammered, "what are you doing here? How did I know?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Tyler, my boy, I've been monitoring FBI communications for months. I knew they were closing in. What I didn't know was that your dear old dad here was the one feeding them information." Marcus stepped fully into the kitchen, and I could see something bulging in his jacket pocket. My blood ran cold as I realized what it might be. "You know, Wesley," Marcus continued, his voice conversational but carrying an undertone of violence, "you've caused me a considerable amount of trouble. Years of careful planning, millions of dollars in operations, all ruined because you couldn't mind your own business." "Marcus, please," Emily said, her voice shaking. "Just leave. Just go away and leave us alone." "Oh, sweetheart," Marcus said, turning to his daughter with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm afraid it's too late for that. Your father-in-law here has made sure that my old life is over. But before I start my new life, I think we need to have a little conversation about consequences." The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock and the sound of Tyler's rapid breathing. This was the moment I'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. Marcus Williams, stripped of his mask of respectability, revealed as the dangerous criminal he'd always been. The end game was beginning, and there was no going back now. Marcus Williams stood in my kitchen doorway like a well-dressed predator, his expensive suit unable to hide the menace radiating from him. The transformation was complete. Gone was the charming businessman, the generous father-in-law, the pillar of the community. What remained was something cold and dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. "You know what I find most amusing about this situation?" Marcus said, stepping deeper into the kitchen. "Here I am, a man who's built a multi-million-dollar empire, being lectured about morality by a grease monkey who's never owned anything worth more than this pathetic little house." Tyler was still standing, his face a mixture of confusion and growing horror. "Marcus, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Why are you here?" "Sit down, Tyler," Marcus commanded, his voice taking on the authoritative tone I'd heard him use at family gatherings when he wanted to control the conversation. "Your father and I need to have a discussion about the consequences of betrayal." I remained seated, my hands flat on the table, projecting a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Emily, sweetheart, why don't you go into the living room?" "This doesn't concern you." "Oh, but it does concern her," Marcus said, his smile turning predatory. "Emily's been a crucial part of my operation for years. Did you know that, Wesley? Your precious daughter-in-law has been helping me launder money through her bank accounts since the day she married your son." Emily's face went white. "That's not true. I would never." "Of course you wouldn't knowingly," Marcus said with mock sympathy. "But ignorance isn't innocence, sweetheart. Every gift I gave you, every deposit I made into your accounts, every investment I helped you make, it was all dirty money being cleaned through your legitimate identity." Tyler sank back into his chair as if his legs had given out. "You used us. You used Emily. You used our marriage as a front for your criminal enterprise." "I used what was available," Marcus replied matter-of-factly. "And what was available was a naive young couple desperate to live above their means, happy to accept generous gifts without asking uncomfortable questions." My phone buzzed again, and Marcus noticed immediately. "Ah, that would be your FBI friends, wouldn't it? Agent Martinez, I believe. Lovely woman. Very thorough, very determined. Unfortunately for her, it was very predictable." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I didn't want to know the answer. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what I'd feared he might have, a small black device that looked like a sophisticated GPS tracker. "I've been monitoring Agent Martinez's movements for weeks. I know she's got teams positioned around my house, around my office, probably around yours, too. What she doesn't know is that I've been planning my exit strategy for months." Emily was crying now, quiet tears of realization and betrayal. "Daddy, how could you do this to us? How could you destroy our lives like this? Destroy your lives?" Marcus laughed, the sound harsh and grating in the small kitchen. "Sweetheart, I gave you life. Before me, you were nobody. A small-town girl married to a struggling lawyer, living paycheck to paycheck, driving used cars and shopping at discount stores. I gave you luxury, status, respect. I made you somebody." "You made us criminals," Tyler said, his voice stronger now, anger beginning to replace shock. "You turned our marriage into a criminal conspiracy without our knowledge or consent." "And you loved every minute of it," Marcus shot back. "Don't pretend you didn't enjoy the money, the cars, the house, the vacations. Don't pretend you weren't happy to look down on your father and his modest little life while spending money you never earned." The accusation hit its mark. Tyler flinched as if he'd been slapped, and I could see him beginning to understand the full scope of what had been done to him. Not just the criminal manipulation, but the way it had corrupted his values, turned him against his own family. "But none of that matters now," Marcus continued, his tone becoming businesslike. "What matters is damage control. Wesley here has created a problem, and problems need to be solved." My blood ran cold as Marcus reached into his other pocket and withdrew something that made Emily gasp and Tyler go rigid with fear. It wasn't a gun, as I'd feared, but something almost worse, a thick envelope filled with what looked like official documents. "Do you know what these are, Wesley?" Marcus asked, fanning the papers like a deck of cards. "These are federal warrants for your arrest, for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to money laundering." The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Emily's quiet sobbing. Tyler was staring at the documents like they were venomous snakes. "You see," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the smooth, persuasive tone of a successful salesman, "while you've been playing amateur detective, I've been working with some very talented people to create an alternative narrative. One in which you, Wesley Franklin, are not a concerned father cooperating with law enforcement, but a criminal accomplice who helped me launder money through your son's marriage." "That's impossible," I said, but even as I spoke, I could feel doubt creeping in. Marcus hadn't survived in his world for as long as he had by being careless or unprepared. "Is it?" Marcus smiled. "Your garage has been receiving unusually large payments for repairs on vehicles that don't exist. Your personal bank account shows deposits that you can't adequately explain. Your son and daughter-in-law have been living far beyond their means, and you're the family patriarch who arranged it all." Tyler found his voice. "Nobody will believe that. Dad would never— Your father is a working-class man with no education who suddenly found himself connected to significant wealth through your marriage. The story writes itself, Tyler. A desperate man sees an opportunity to improve his circumstances, gets in over his head, tries to go to the authorities when things get too hot." Marcus spread the documents on the table next to my evidence, and I could see they were professionally prepared, complete with official-looking seals and signatures. The beauty of having connections in the right places is that you can create whatever version of reality serves your purposes. My phone rang suddenly, Agent Martinez's name flashing on the screen. Marcus gestured for me to answer it, his expression making it clear that refusing wasn't an option. "Mr. Franklin." Agent Martinez's voice was tense, urgent. "We have a problem. We're seeing unusual movement around your location. Are you safe? Is your family with you?" Before I could answer, Marcus took the phone from my hand. "Agent Martinez, this is Marcus Williams. I believe you and I need to have a conversation." "Mr. Williams." Agent Martinez's voice came through the phone speaker, crisp and professional, despite the obvious tension. "I need you to understand that you're in a very serious situation right now. The best thing you can do is surrender yourself peacefully." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing in my small kitchen like breaking glass. "Agent Martinez, I think you misunderstand who has the upper hand here. I'm holding 3 civilians hostage. I have evidence that will destroy Wesley Franklin's credibility as a witness, and I have escape routes that your people haven't even thought to monitor." "Marcus, don't make this worse than it already is," I said quietly, but he silenced me with a look that could have frozen fire. "Oh, but Wesley, it's about to get much worse. You see, Agent Martinez, Mr. Franklin here isn't the noble whistleblower you think he is. He's been my partner in this operation from the beginning." Tyler's head snapped up. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Marcus pulled out one of the fabricated documents and held it up to the phone's camera. "Bank records showing payments from my shell companies to Franklin's Auto Repair. Vehicle registrations for cars that don't exist. A very compelling paper trail showing that Wesley Franklin has been laundering money through his garage for the past 3 years. Emily was shaking now, her hands pressed against her mouth as if to hold back screams. Tyler looked like he was watching his entire world collapse in real time. Agent Martinez's voice was steady, but I could hear the concern underneath. Mr. Williams, even if those documents were legitimate, which I seriously doubt, it doesn't change the fact that you're currently committing multiple federal crimes. Release the civilians, and we can discuss whatever evidence you think you have. I don't think so, Marcus said, ending the call and pocketing my phone. Now where were we? Ah yes, consequences. He turned to Tyler and Emily, his expression shifting to something that might have resembled paternal concern if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. You two have a choice to make. You can continue to believe Wesley's version of events, that he's some kind of hero trying to protect you from the big bad criminal. Or you can accept the reality that he's been using you just as much as I have, except he's been doing it while pretending to be your loving father. You're lying, Tyler said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. The seed of doubt had been planted. Am I? Tyler, how do you think your father could afford to pay for your education on a mechanic's salary? How do you think he managed to keep this house when property values in this neighborhood tripled? How do you think he's been able to live so modestly while having enough money to support your lifestyle? I watched my son's face as Marcus's words hit their target. Tyler was a lawyer, trained to think analytically, to spot inconsistencies in stories, and Marcus was very good at creating believable lies. The truth is, Marcus continued, your father has been taking money from me for years. Not directly, of course. He's too smart for that. But through a network of legitimate seeming transactions that allowed him to funnel dirty money into clean investments. He's been playing the humble working man while skimming profits from my operations. Stop, Emily said suddenly, her voice stronger than it had been all evening. Just stop. I don't care what documents you have or what stories you've made up. Mr. Franklin saved us from you. He could have kept quiet and kept taking your money if he was really your partner. Instead, he called the FBI and risked everything to protect us. Marcus's expression darkened. Emily, sweetheart, you're not thinking clearly. You're traumatized, confused. You need to consider the possibility that both men in your life have been using you. But Emily was standing now, her tears replaced by something that looked like steel. No, I've spent 3 years watching Mr. Franklin. I've seen how he lives, how he treats people, how he sacrifices for the people he loves. You spent 3 years lying to my face, using me as a tool in your criminal enterprise, and manipulating my husband into believing that money was more important than integrity. Tyler was staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Emily. And you, she turned to Tyler, her voice gaining strength with each word, you spent years being ashamed of the man who gave up everything for you. You were so blinded by my father's money that you couldn't see the real man standing right in front of you. Marcus's calm facade was beginning to crack. Emily, you're making a mistake. You're choosing the wrong side. No, she said firmly. I'm choosing the right side. Finally. The sound of sirens was growing louder outside, and Marcus's head snapped toward the window. His carefully constructed plan was falling apart, and I could see desperation beginning to replace confidence in his expression. This isn't over, he said, backing toward the kitchen door. Those documents will surface. Wesley's reputation will be destroyed. Even if I go to prison, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man your precious father really is. But as he reached the doorway, Tyler stood up. For the first time since this nightmare began, my son looked like the man I'd raised, the one who understood the difference between right and wrong. Marcus, Tyler said, his voice carrying an authority I hadn't heard before, you're wrong about my father, and you're wrong about me. I may have been fooled by your money and your charm, but I'm not fooled anymore. My father is twice the man you are, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. For just a moment, his mask slipped completely, revealing the petty, insecure criminal underneath all the expensive clothes and smooth talk. You'll regret this, Marcus snarled. But the sirens were very close now, and we could see flashing lights through the kitchen window. "The only thing I regret," Tyler said, moving to stand beside me, "is that I ever thought you were worth admiring." Marcus Williams, the man who had seemed so powerful and successful just hours before, ran from my kitchen like the coward he'd always been underneath. Within minutes, we heard shouts, the sound of car doors slamming, and then blessed silence. Agent Martinez appeared in my doorway, flanked by other federal agents, their weapons drawn but lowered. "Is everyone all right?" I looked around my small kitchen, at the scattered documents, the overturned water glass, the evidence of a confrontation that had changed all of our lives forever. Tyler was standing beside me, really standing with me, for the first time in years. Emily was holding both our hands, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Yes," I said simply, "we're going to be all right." 18 months later, I was lying under the hood of a 2008 Honda Civic when I heard familiar footsteps echoing across the concrete floor of Patterson's garage. I'd been working on this particular car for 3 days. The owner was a single mother with 2 kids who needed reliable transportation but couldn't afford much in the way of repair bills, so I'd been taking my time, making sure everything was perfect, charging her only for parts. "Dad?" Tyler's voice called out, competing with the classic rock playing from my ancient radio. I slid out from under the car, wiping my hands on a rag that was more grease than fabric by now. Tyler stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a work shirt, looking more like the man I'd raised than the arrogant lawyer he'd become for a few years there. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the expensive suit and the entitled attitude, replaced by someone who looked comfortable in his own skin for the first time in years. "Tyler, this is a nice surprise. What brings you there?" He walked over slowly, his hands in his pockets, looking around the garage with what appeared to be genuine interest rather than the barely concealed embarrassment he'd shown for so long. "Emily and I wanted to give you this." He handed me an envelope, thick and cream-colored, the kind used for important announcements. I opened it carefully and found a formal document inside, a business license for Franklin and Williams Legal Services, with both Tyler's and Emily's names listed as partners. Below that was a handwritten note in Emily's precise script. "Dear Dad Franklin," it began, and I smiled at the title she'd insisted on calling me since that terrible night when her world fell apart. "1 year ago, you saved our lives by destroying our illusions. Today, we want you to know that we've built something new from the ashes of our old life. Something honest, something meaningful, something that makes us proud to get up every morning." I looked up to find Tyler watching me read, something vulnerable and hopeful in his expression. "You did it," I said simply. "You actually did it." "We did it," Tyler corrected. "Emily and I, together. We've got a small office downtown, nothing fancy, but it's ours. We handle divorce cases, custody disputes, immigration issues, and criminal defense for people who can't afford the big firms." "And how's business?" Tyler's grin was self-deprecating but genuinely happy. "Slow but steady. We're not getting rich, but we're paying the bills and actually helping people. It feels—" He paused, searching for the right words. "It feels honest. It feels like something Mom would have been proud of." I felt a tightness in my chest at the mention of Tyler's mother. She would have been proud. Proud of the man he'd become. Proud of the choices he was making. Proud of the way he'd found his way back to the values she and I had tried to instill in him. "How's Emily holding up?" "And her mother?" "Better than anyone expected. Emily's turned out to be a natural at family law. She has this way of connecting with clients who've been betrayed or abandoned. I think going through what she went through with Marcus gives her credibility with people who've lost everything." Tyler picked up a wrench from my workbench, turning it over in his hands the way he used to do when he was a child, fascinated by tools and machinery. "And Margaret, Emily's mom, she's doing really well. She got a job at a nonprofit that helps women escape domestic violence. Turns out she has a lot of insight into how abusers manipulate their victims." "What about Marcus?" "How's his trial going?" Tyler's expression darkened slightly. "He's looking at 35 to life. The prosecution has him dead to rights on multiple charges. Agent Martinez says it's one of the most comprehensive financial crime cases she's ever worked on." He paused, setting down the wrench. "Emily doesn't want to see him, doesn't want anything to do with him. She says he died for her the night he was arrested." I nodded, understanding the sentiment completely. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we have to mourn like deaths, letting go not just of who they were, but of who we thought they were. "There's something else," Tyler continued, his voice taking on a formal tone that made me look at him more closely. "Emily and I have been talking, and we want to ask you something important." Before I could respond, Emily appeared in the garage doorway, and my breath caught in my throat. She was glowing with the unmistakable radiance of early pregnancy, her hand resting protectively on a small but noticeable bump beneath her simple cotton dress. "Surprise!" she called out, her voice filled with joy and excitement and just a touch of nervousness. I dropped the rag I'd been holding and moved toward them, my heart swelling with emotions I couldn't quite name. "Emily, sweetheart, how far along are you?" 4 months. We wanted to wait until we were sure everything was okay before we told anyone. She walked over and took my grease-stained hands in her clean ones, not caring about the oil or dirt. "We also wanted to ask you something." Tyler cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous. "Dad, we were wondering, that is, we were hoping, would you consider being this baby's grandfather? Officially, I mean. We know you're already going to be the grandfather, but Emily's father—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "What Tyler's trying to say," Emily continued gently, "is that this baby isn't going to have a grandfather on my side of the family. Marcus will probably be in prison for the rest of his life, and even if he weren't, we wouldn't want him anywhere near our child. But you've been more of a father to me than my biological father ever was," Emily continued, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed me what integrity looks like, what real strength means. You saved us when we couldn't save ourselves. We want our child to grow up knowing you, learning from you, and understanding what it means to be a good person because of your example." I felt tears forming in my eyes, and for once, I didn't try to hide them. These 2 young people, who had lost everything and rebuilt their lives from scratch, wanted me to be part of their future. They wanted their child to know the man I was, not despite my humble circumstances, but because of the values those circumstances had taught me. "I would be honored," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely honored." Emily threw her arms around me then, and Tyler joined us, and for a moment we stood there in my grimy garage, surrounded by tools and car parts and the honest smell of motor oil, and it felt like the most perfect place in the world. When we finally pulled apart, Tyler was smiling through his tears. "There's one more thing, Dad. We've been thinking about names, and if it's a boy, we want to name him Wesley. After you." The words hit me like a physical blow, but it was the good kind of blow, the kind that knocks you down with joy rather than pain. My grandson would carry my name, would grow up knowing the story of how his parents had found their way back to what mattered most. "And if it's a girl?" I asked. Emily's smile was radiant. "Grace, because that's what you showed us. Grace under pressure, grace in the face of betrayal, grace when you had every right to be bitter or angry or vindictive." I thought about that terrible Sunday dinner 18 months ago, about the cruel words Tyler had spoken, about the choice I'd made to expose Marcus's crimes rather than let my son continue living a lie. At the time, it had felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done. Watching Tyler's world collapse around him, knowing that I was the one wielding the hammer. Now I understood that it had been the greatest gift I could have given him, the gift of truth, the gift of a second chance, the gift of understanding what really mattered in life. "You know," I said, wiping my hands on the least dirty part of my coveralls, "your mother would have loved Emily. She would have been so proud of the woman you married, Tyler. And she would have been over the moon about becoming a grandmother." Tyler's voice was quiet when he spoke. "I think about her a lot these days, about the sacrifices she made, the ones I never understood when I was younger. I wish I could tell her that I get it now, that I finally understand what real love looks like. She knows, I said simply. Wherever she is, she knows. Emily checked her watch and made a small sound of surprise. We should get going. We have a client meeting in an hour, a woman whose ex-husband has been hiding assets to avoid paying child support. The kind of case you never would have taken at Morrison, Stewart and Associates, I observed. Tyler grinned. The kind of case that makes me remember why I wanted to be a lawyer in the first place. To help people, not to help rich people get richer. As they prepared to leave, Tyler turned back to me one last time. Dad, I need you to know something. That night, when I said you were half the man Marcus was, that was the most wrong I've ever been about anything in my life. Marcus Williams was a criminal who destroyed everything he touched. You're a man who builds things, who creates value, who makes the world better just by being in it. He paused, his voice becoming stronger and more certain. You're twice the man Marcus Williams ever was. Hell, you're 10 times the man he was, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. I watched them walk away together, hand in hand, and I felt a profound sense of completion. Not because my story was over, but because the most important chapter, the one about raising a son who could stand on his own 2 feet and make good choices and love honestly, that chapter was finally finished. I turned back to the Honda Civic, sliding back under the hood to finish the work I'd started. It was honest work, meaningful work, the kind of work that kept families on the road and put food on tables and made the world run a little more smoothly. As I tightened the last bolt on the engine, I thought about the conversation Tyler and I had had that terrible Sunday night, about his definition of what made a man successful. He'd learned something in the months since then, something I'd been trying to teach him his whole life. That real success isn't measured in dollars or status symbols or other people's approval. Real success is measured in the lives you touch, the people you help, the love you give and receive. It's measured in honesty and integrity and the courage to do the right thing even when it's hard. It's measured in sons who grow up to be good men and daughters-in-law who become daughters of the heart and grandchildren who will carry your name and your values into the future. By any of those measures, I was the richest man in the world. If you enjoyed this story about family, redemption, and the true meaning of success, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect the people you love? Has there been a time when losing everything led you to discover what really mattered? Please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories about the complexities of family relationships. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from remaining true to yourself.